Hey there, folks. So today I want to talk about something that I've kind of touched on before, but I want to talk about it in a broader sense with a bit more of a focus. I have brought up the idea before of things that I have in the past called dedicated haters, anti-fans. I'm gonna go with the phrase hatedom as opposed to a fandom. And I kind of want to look at the phenomenon because it really, in many ways, feels like it is increasingly grabbing the discourse and wrenching control of it. Or at least trying to. So, before I can get too far into this, I probably should explain what I mean by hatedom. Now, the problem is I'm going to be spending most of this video explaining what I mean by hatedom. But if you want the real quick bullet point of it, a hatedom is a group of people who engage with something, be it a piece of media, a specific creator, a celebrity, what have you. They engage with it with the fervor you would normally expect from somebody who is a very large fan of a thing. However, they despise it. So this is someone who deeply dislikes something, but they also can't stop following it or talking about it. And that's the broadest sense of this. As I said, as we move along, I will talk about it in more detail with some specific examples and some of the nuances to this. I just found myself thinking about this more and more because it's kind of a weird phenomenon if you stop and think about it, because at a basic level, you'd think if you hate a thing, disengage from it. Stop watching it. Stop reading it. Stop playing it. Whatever it might be. If you clearly hate this thing so much, why are you sinking so much of your time into it? Now, there's one specific aspect that is a factor in this whole discussion, and I'm going to bring it up, acknowledge it, but then also move on from it. So that is, well, people who do what I do. In terms of being pundits, commentators, or otherwise putting out content about other things, about, pieces of media, franchises, etc. That's not all that I do, but it is most of what I do here on this channel. And there are definitely tons of people on YouTube, on TikTok, on Twitter. I will never call it X, other than to acknowledge the fact that I won't call it that. But, these and other places certainly have a ton of people who have built an entire online presence, if not a viable career, out of hating things. And you would more clearly define them by what they hate than by what they like. I would, you could probably guess, lump most anti-woke, anti-SJW, anti-DEI creators under this umbrella. Fucking pronouns! One does not necessarily have to be under that umbrella to have this kind of phenomenon. Sometimes you will get creators who have a variety of content, but they keep coming back to this one thing they hate, and every time it comes up in the news, or if it's a show, every time there's a new episode, they gotta talk about how terrible it is, even though you could just stop watching. Now, I'm acknowledging the existence of these kind of creators because they are absolutely a factor insofar as they stoke the fires and stir the pot. I'm now going to discard them from this particular discussion because even though they are a factor in how fervent things can go, and they certainly can become a lightning rod for specific talking points that get settled on amongst a hatedom, I also know why they're doing it more often than not. Now, this isn't 100% across the board, but most of them are doing it for money or attention or clicks or whatever, because they have found that they get attention and an audience that engages with their work when they slam a certain thing. From a pure analytical standpoint, I get it. I see my own metrics. I know negative stuff tends to do better than positive. I am aware of that. And I am not necessarily going to say that every single creator who engages in this kind of thing is a grifter, but I am going to say you will not be able to distinguish someone who is doing it only because it has favorable metrics and gets them attention and or money from someone who is doing it sincerely where it's also getting them attention and getting the money. Like, you will not be able to tell an actual grifter who doesn't even sincerely hold this belief from somebody who actually does and has just monetized it. So it's a distinction without a difference. And ultimately, I'm going to push them aside because the performative nature of what they do, it automatically kind of makes it a bit of a different thing. And also, the reason I'm going to disregard them is because while they might capitalize on and stoke the fires of hatedom, they don't create it. These outrage merchants, these people who peddle anger, they generally are actually kind of bad at manufacturing outrage out of nothing. They try, and they certainly do blow stuff out of proportion, but there still has to be an anger for them to tap into. There has to be a group of viewers out there who care enough about hating this thing to keep engaging with the content that person's making. And it's that group, the people who actually make up the body of a hatedom, that I want to focus on, rather than creators who are capitalizing on them and or mobilizing them when they decide that they want to point them at a target. That's another thing that happens, but again, shoving all that aside. So it kind of begs the question, if we're not talking about people who have monetized and capitalized, be it financial or social capital, they are not capitalizing on the hate for a thing, what do these other people who actually make up the body of a hatedom, what are they doing? Because as I said, you'd think if you hate a thing, you'd just disengage from it. You just wouldn't watch it. And I'm generally going to use the terms watch because I feel like shows and franchises with a visual media tend to get this the most. It's not exclusive to that by any means. There are definitely, say, book series with dedicated hatedoms. But I feel like this kind of happens for one of a couple reasons. And I think it's interesting making a distinction because the first group I'm going to talk about were people who used to like a thing but no longer do. So this is going to be the bulk of your hatedom for things like Star Wars, Star Trek, Marvel, DC, and certainly Doctor Who. There are channels out there who have been covering Doctor Who have hated everything Doctor Who related for years. And yet they still talk about every single episode that comes out. But since I'm setting aside the actual creators, more to the point, there are still people who watch them talk about hating every single episode that comes out. So there is a viewership that feels that same distaste. And by and large, when I encounter these people, because they show up in my own comments intermittently, not as much as they used to. I think once they realized that I was not one of them, even when I was being more negative about the show and have been more negative about the show, it's been up and down last few years for sure. But I think once they realized that they were not going to stoke me into being one of them, they largely moved on. But I've definitely seen this, and by and large, what you get from that are people who assert this used to be good and now it's bad. And I do think that is a specific flavor of hatedom. When something that you not only like, but love, something that you've sunk a lot of time, care, possibly even like a lot of yourself into. I mean, you think about how dedicated fans can be to a thing, you know, putting up the posters, going to conventions, really embracing it as a core part of their identity. And if they start to hate it, that's a difficult thing to process. Because your options are to walk away from a thing that used to be defining for you, that you used to love, and that's not easy, or to find somebody to blame. Which brings us to one of the major aspects of hatedom, which is it never stays limited to the actual end product when we are talking about anything that is a franchise, a show, a book series, etc. It always has to extend to the people who made it. This is first and foremost anyone involved in writing, directing, show running, if we're talking about a TV show, and also sometimes to a greater, sometimes to a lesser extent, the actors as well. you probably wouldn't be surprised if I were to tell you that male actors are more likely to be given a pass, whereas women are far more likely to be harassed for associating with projects like this. And if people of color also, and if you're a woman of color, you probably aren't going to be too shocked by that. But certainly the creators, the writers, the directors, the showrunners, they are going to get a lot of heat. Because, as I said, Hatedom is very much a mirror reflection of fandom. And, like, your casual viewer doesn't necessarily know the name of the writer of a certain episode. Or, like, all that many details about the creator of a show. They might not even really remember off the top of their head the name of who created the show. A dedicated fan will. A dedicated fan will have not only their favorite characters or favorite episodes, they'll have their favorite directors, their favorite writers. They will have all this knowledge of the background and behind the scenes and all this stuff. Well, Hatedoms will have that too, but for the purposes of having people to blame. And this is especially true when we are talking about something that they used to love. Now, I don't want to examine too much the reasons that they will give for why they say they no longer like a thing that they used to like, because, all right, I don't want to accuse anybody of lying. I do want to say, though, I think most people are not especially good at examining why they do or don't like a thing, or why their feelings on a thing have changed over time. It is kind of a human nature thing to assume that you just know what you're talking about, and if your feelings are different, the thing changed, not you. And it's always way more complicated than that. So, like, when you get people saying things like, it didn't used to be so political, or the politics used to be subtle, neither of which is true. If we're talking about, again, something like Doctor Who, neither of those is true or ever was. They might believe it. That might be the thing that they've latched on to explain why they no longer engage with this thing they used to like. You certainly get that a lot from people who scream that it's woke now, even if, again, I'll cite Doctor Who because it's something I know a fair bit about. Even though the so-called woke themes and ideas were baked in from very, very, very early in the show, if not the literal beginning. Star Wars goes through the same thing. That first movie is literally anti-imperial. Like, it has to be. They're fighting the Empire.
The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So, you know, these ideas are always there, but people will claim, no, it didn't used to be like that. But as I said, I don't really want to get too much into the arguments that those in Hatedom will give for why they say they no longer like a thing they used to like, because it's difficult to know how many of them truly believe what they say, or even if they do, how accurate it is. Because again, most people aren't great at knowing why they like a thing. I do believe they are sincere when they say, I don't like it now, I used to like it then. But I do feel like a lot of folks, and like, I'm not saying this to shame anybody. If it's not literally your job to examine media, then it's not your job to examine media and have a full understanding of the ins and outs of why you do or don't like a thing. You are allowed to just go, I like it, I don't like it. You don't have to think more on it than that. And if it's not your job to do so, why would you? So when I say most people aren't great at understanding why they like or don't like a thing, they tend to just fall back onto core assumptions that they make about themselves. Dan Olson actually kind of illustrated this really well when he talked about the introduction and the execution of Warcraft Classic and the arguments that people made about why Warcraft used to be good but no longer was.
They tend to lean really heavily on value statements, appeals to the things that the wider social group believe are superior qualities, which can lead to some hot nonsense, like saying that World of Warcraft was best when it was hardest back in Classic, which is a comical statement because Classic just isn't very hard. So there's this syllogism at play where we take three suppositions. A, hard games are good. B, I liked World of Warcraft in 2006. C, I like good games. I liked World of Warcraft, and I like good games, therefore World of Warcraft was good, and good games are hard games, therefore World of Warcraft must have been hard because I like it, and I like good games.
But as I said, there is a gut instinct to find someone to blame. And that's not even limited to like geeky fandoms or things like that. You see that in sports fans. When their team isn't doing as well, they want to blame somebody. They want to blame the coach. They want to blame players who are just making bad calls or aren't what they used to be. And rather than accept any other possibilities, such as, maybe other teams are just doing better and not everybody is suddenly horrible, you don't necessarily need to blame someone. We like a person to blame, especially if it feels like something was taken from us. I used to like this thing, now it sucks. Who did that? Who made it a thing I hate? And that's where you get all the blaming of creators, of actors, of executives even. Cripes! Does a whole lot of the Star Wars hatedom have the biggest raging hate boner for Kathleen Kennedy that I've ever seen pushed at an executive. DC fans don't hate David Zaslav as much as a certain kind of Star Wars fan will say that they hate Kathleen Kennedy. And David Zaslav has done demonstrably way more damage to way more properties. But again, they go harder after a woman. I wonder why. Well, I'm not really hiding from the misogyny and racism that comes up when certain creators, actors, or people otherwise involved are targeted more harshly than others. I also don't want to imply that hatedom is exclusive to cishet white men. They are certainly the predominant faces amongst the creators who appeal to these audiences. Among the actual hatedoms, kind of depends on what it is that they hate. But yeah, certainly Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. Historically, those are fan bases that, at least at some point in time, have been primarily male cis white. And of course that means when they feel that they are not being catered to, everyone else is, and then you get the culture war nonsense, which is a bit beyond the scope of what I want to get into today. I suppose it's also worth noting, I don't want to pretend like franchises and IP don't get worse. They do. Not everything stays at the exact same kind of quality forever. Everything will have its highs, its lows, its dips, and its peaks. You can look at something like Marvel, and whatever you think of Marvel's recent output, I still have not seen the Thunderbolts at time of recording. I've heard it's good. I haven't gotten to it. But no matter what you think of Marvel's current output, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find anybody, even the ones who like a lot of what Marvel's been doing lately, to say that it's as good or better than the tail end of the Infinity Saga, where we were getting things like Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War. I don't think it's unfair to say that the output isn't as good, and I don't think people are wrong to look for reasons why that might be the case. That said, where it goes from concerned fan to hatedom is where there is anger behind that. Not just like, oh, you're taking it in a direction that I don't think works as well, but actual rage behind that. Yeah, it is kind of a different beast. But I also don't want to leave you with the impression like these things don't change, only the fans change. Not true. These things absolutely do change. And whenever you get something that is long running, like Star Wars, like Doctor Who, like Star Trek, yeah, you're going to have people who no longer feel served by the current output, but they used to like it. And again, maybe that's just because they themselves and their tastes have changed in a way that they don't recognize, or they have very heavy nostalgia goggles that they have not come to grips with, or it could very well mean that the entire property has gone in a new direction that just isn't to their taste. But again, what makes it a hatedom is rather than going, oh, that's a shame, and walking away, they direct rage at it. I understand how you could get caught in that. I don't talk about Star Wars a lot anymore. I used to talk about almost anything Star Wars related. Not so much now. I mean, I watched Andor, talked about those over my secondary channel. I'm not even planning to make a main channel video on Andor. That's kind of been about it. So I don't like continually coming back to something that has definitely lost me. Now, I look at Doctor Who and it's like, it is yet to fully lose me. It's made me go, oh, what are you doing? But even in its weakest eras, it's still at least given me some things where I can go, okay, that though. That worked. That definitely worked. So it gives me something to cling on to. I've said in the past, I don't know how I would ever fully walk away from Doctor Who, but if we're being honest, if I got multiple years where there wasn't a single episode in a run that I thought was any good, that might do it. But it probably would take that. It would take multiple years of not just bad stuff, but a lack of good stuff. Because I can sustain myself through some bad times as long as there's at least a little light to guide my way. And I don't mean to focus excessively on Doctor Who, but like this kind of was what got me thinking about this because, well, I saw something really odd happen this most recent season of Doctor Who, which was that I saw people largely positive on this new era with Russell T Davies coming back to run the show, with Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and most of them didn't like the finale of season 1, but they were all pretty stoked through most of this past season until the last episode came out. And I saw so many people, just amongst the general fandom, but also, yes, some of the creators get really nasty, get rude, get personal, get upset. And again, they have a right to be upset if they don't like a thing. I've gotten upset by Doctor Who, certainly. But at the same time, there was something about, I think, how much love and hope that they had poured into this era coming off the Chibnall era, which was not especially popular. It has its fans. I don't want to pretend it doesn't. But then coming into this new era with so much hope and having that hope dashed seems to have flipped a switch in some people. And it wasn't pleasant to see. The thing is, though, not all hatedoms can be traced to having once liked a thing, but now you don't. Because sometimes hatedoms arrive almost instantaneously and right alongside the thing, and it's people who never liked it. So this is where we get into the other branch of hatedom, because we've talked about, I used to love this, now I don't. But there's also, I hate this thing and it's successful. And I do get how that fuels anger. Heck, I did over an hour-long video talking about how much I hate the movie The Shining, and I admitted in that video part of the reason that I hate it instead of just dislike it is because of how often I see it at the top of greatest horror movies of all time, how much it's just taken as a given that it's an amazing movie, and how many people have just gone on these excessive rambles and dissections and all this stuff what a brilliant piece of media. That was what elevated my dislike of that movie to actual hatred, because I felt like nobody else is seeing what I'm seeing and it's not good. Again, spent a whole hour going through that, so I don't need to revisit it here. But I do understand the frustration at something you don't like getting that popular. You could arguably chalk up things like the hatedom towards Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey to some of this, at least in part. It gets more complicated in both those cases with Twilight because there is a very long history of pretty much all of culture continually mocking and degrading anything that is liked by teenage girls, like it happens with boy bands and teen idols, and it happened with Twilight, and it's like, oh, teenage girls like it? Must be garbage. Let's pick on it and make fun of it. And with 50 Shades, there are very legitimate reasons to really, really dislike those books, especially if you are part of the kink community and you understand how horribly it depicts BDSM. But, let's not pretend that at least a decent amount of that wasn't just fury at the fact that it was successful. I think in both those cases, it would never have picked up a dedicated hatedom if it wasn't I see this as crap, why is it so successful? I think that can fuel a lot of stuff. And I think that is at least part of what has fueled something like the hatedom towards Hell of a Boss, Has Been Hotel, and their joint creator, who goes by the online handle VivsyPop. Now, there will be some people in the Hatedom who will say that it used to be good, but it isn't now, which is not an untenable position, but a little bit of an odd one. I guess in the case of Hell of a Boss, you could make the case it used to be more of a goofy comedy. It's not now. But that rarely strikes me as something being worth getting upset about, especially because it only had like 8 episodes being a goofy comedy before it started getting serious. And then in the case of Has Been Hotel, you had the pilot, and then you had a break. But as soon as the new season came out, the Hatedom was in full swing. And I could honestly do an entire dissection just on the Hatedom of Vivzy Pop. I don't want to, because it's a rabbit hole and a half, but there are lots of people who just seem to dedicate all their time to following everything she has ever done, said, or has been said about her, and dredging it all up and painting it and talking about it in the worst possible light. I got my taste of that when I talked about Has Been Hotel last year. Initially talking about a specific episode in that first season that focused on Angel Dust, and then later interviewing the storyboard artist who worked on that episode, who is part of his own Hatedom. It's kind of associated with Vivzy, but R2, who was the storyboard artist I talked to, also has his own dedicated like mini Hatedom within the greater Hatedom of Vivzy. And the only real explanation that I have is this fury from people who look at these things, look at Hell of a Boss, look at Has Been Hotel, and see something bad. The reasons for why they think it's bad can vary. There's a really bizarre puritanical streak among a lot of the Hatedom for those shows, which is doubly odd considering that, at least observationally, I haven't done a deep dive and I'm afraid to, it really does seem like a high percentage of that Hatedom skews young to the point that they really shouldn't be watching this in the first place. Again, it's really weird.
Hey, it's Vera from The Edit. I'm jumping in here real quick because I said about a minute ago that I had a hard time thinking of any reason other than being angry at the success of a thing they didn't like for some of these things. There is actually a slight variant to that is worth addressing by itself, and that is hating the intended audience. I would actually say if we touch on the anti-woke stuff again, this is a pretty heavy factor. It is partially that they don't like that this thing isn't for them, but there are people who, when they encounter something that is not for them, imagine who the audience is and then come to wild conclusions, and sometimes it drums up a lot of anger. And to a certain degree, I get it. It grosses me out when something that I find absolutely reprehensible and appeals to some instincts and notions that I really dislike does especially well. I mean, just the success of the anti-woke folks annoys me on principle. Another way this manifests is people who are extremely uncomfortable or angered by adult content, and the only kind of audience they can picture enjoying it is somebody who objectifies, dehumanizes, and otherwise views other people as just meat sacks for their own physical enjoyment. Which is a really frustrating thing to come across if you've ever, just had a casual conversation with people about stuff like kink or BDSM. I don't think this needs any more specific focus, but I really think it was worth mentioning because this is a slight difference from what I'd been talking about just not liking a thing that is successful. Sometimes you also hate the audience, even if the audience that you are mad at is kind of what you have imagined them to be in your own head.
But you can get puritanical streaks, you can get just this general notion of this thing does not deserve the success that it has. Or you can get, people who cry woke and go, it's got all these politics now that it didn't used to, and all these different reasons to hate it. But the end result is still following every development, following every tweet from the creators, and then not just following it, getting angry about it, showing up in the replies of anybody bringing it up just to say how bad it is.
Vivzy Pop is a helpful example in that she illustrates one of the very common phenomenons in hatedoms in general and this kind of hatedom in particular, which is that the people who hate her have a whole list of reasons that they will cite, specific things that she has said or done or has been accused of having said or doing. But without getting into the weeds of debunking things, the point is that those come second. The hate is first, the reasons are found later. These are people who already decided they hate her and then go digging through her stuff to find reasons to validate the hatred. This behavior might well be one of the defining aspects of hatedom. Even if they find what they feel are valid reasons to hate a person, the hate itself always came first. If they didn't hate this person, they wouldn't have gone looking in the first place. And that's not me saying there is no such thing as a valid reason to dislike Vivzy Pop or literally anybody else. There absolutely are. But what I'm talking about in terms of this phenomenon is that the reasons are always secondary. The hate is first.
It's such a bizarre use of one's time. But also, in a way, it kind of has the same appeal of something like a soap opera. Every day, you can tune in for what the latest thing that has been said by Kathleen Kennedy, by Vivzy Pop, James Gunn, who the Snyder Bros frickin' hate right now. You can see anything that they have said or has been said about them and get fueled up by it. This is partly why I think hatedoms spread so far beyond the actual thing that they're initially about and start to focus on the creators. Because, like, when you're talking about a show, be it Has Been Hotel or Doctor Who, there's only so many episodes in a year. What do you get worked up about when there aren't new ones? Oh, she tweeted. Let's get angry about that tweet. In a way, it almost becomes an addiction. That might actually be an overstatement. I'm not sure it's necessarily fully equating to an addiction, but people certainly do seem to get roped into it the same way you would with a daily soap opera back in the day when those were bigger. Because every day there's new twists, new developments, new things to get emotionally engaged with. It's a negative emotional engagement, but let's be honest, how many things out there can you reliably get good feelings from? Even if the feelings that you get are anger, if you know that you can reliably get a strong jolt of feeling, sometimes that's enough to keep some people coming back. Hatedoms really do feel like they've been on the rise in the past decade or so. Anyhow, a big chunk of that is in fact social media. As I said, the outrage merchants certainly fuel this fire, but they're able to tap into an audience because of things like social media. It gets so big that there are dedicated hatedom forums on places like Reddit. And it is able to be fueled because, well, I've talked about this before. When you're in person, these people tend to not be nearly as riled up. I think because when you're actually surrounded by other people and you're in a social situation with actual other human beings, I think a lot of people will just either dial it back or realize, oh, maybe this doesn't matter as much. I know that I've had conversations at places like Gallifrey 1, which is a Doctor Who convention. I've had conversations with people who definitely disagree with me on some of what was going on with the show at the time, and who I suspect probably would have been a lot more vitriolic if they were leaving a comment on one of my videos. But talking in person, they were way more chill. If you're just interacting with people, it can balance you. I don't want to say that nobody's an asshole at conventions, but I've kind of mentioned this before. If you cause a huge scene and start shouting at people at a convention, you'll be asked to leave. You do it in comments on a video, on Twitter, on Reddit. Maybe you'll be blocked. Maybe you'll be removed, but you can just come right back under another account. So there isn't the social incentive to not go over the top with it. And anger fuels anger. We are in a time where there are lots of things to be very legitimately upset about and angry about. I don't want to spread this too far into real world politics, but if you get a jolt from feeling anger, there's a lot more you could be directing that anger towards. Except that trying to change real world things can make you feel impotent. How do I fuel my anger in a way that affects global politics, that affects billionaire corporations? I'm not saying there's nothing you can do, but it doesn't feel as meaningful. You can direct a very shouty screed directly to an actor or a writer, and while you might not be so delusional as to think that's actually going to change the course of the thing you are part of a hatedom of, you will have some assurance that you definitely impacted that person's day. And it makes you feel like you did something, even though all you did was be a jerk. Part of me does wonder if the rise of hatedoms, particularly through online spaces, is partially a sense of impotence when it comes to doing anything about actual problems. I don't know. That might be getting a little too psychoanalytical for my taste. I don't like to go there if I can help it. And look, I'm not saying you can't get upset by stuff. You can dislike stuff. There's stuff I dislike, including stuff that I either have historically or even do currently like. I can still get worked up about Doctor Who. I can really get annoyed at various things that have gone in directions I don't like. And I can definitely be frustrated by the success of things that I have basic fundamental issues with. So the core roots of what leads to this stuff, I get. I empathize. But if you find yourself checking in on a regular basis for the purposes of finding a thing to get mad at, if you find yourself engaging on a daily basis with content that you know only exists to fuel or instigate anger, maybe ask yourself, is this a good use of my time? Am I getting anything out of this? Or maybe should I find a thing I actually like? I've said before, I don't really like talking about things that I don't enjoy. That's a broad statement. Sometimes I do. Sometimes it is, in fact, fun to rip into something. But more often than not, I'd rather enjoy a thing than not. It's more pleasant. It's more relieving. It's more fulfilling to find the good in things. And when it's not there, sometimes you go for the catharsis of anger, because sometimes that's all you've got. But when you're seeking that out over finding a thing that you enjoy, I always think that the thing that's really telling about a lot of things that I would consider to be hatedoms, they only ever talk about what is good in relation to what now sucks. I think this is exemplified by a point that Stephanie Sterling has made a few times, specifically when it comes to the so-called anti-woke gamers, those who won't play the woke games because woke is bad. She's pointed out that these people, even when they find a game that they say is great, they only ever talk about it in terms of how it proves that woke is bad or it makes the woke crowd upset. And they never talk about what they actually like about these games that they champion.
Yes, it's been decided, because of some reasons, that Black Myth Wukong is antithetical to everything them no-good SJWs stand for. Now, are they going to be normal about having a good game to play? Well, I say they have a good game to play. Are they actually playing it, though? After seeing how these diversity-fearing imbeciles have acted in the wake of Black Myth Wukong's release, I'm convinced that if they game at all, it's not to enjoy what they're playing. All entertainment is viewed through the lens of a culture war that's become their entire identity. They don't play games for themselves, they play games at other people. And again, that's if they play at all.
If that's your focus, it's time to probably walk away from a thing. And that can suck. That can hurt, especially if it was something that you used to put a lot of yourself into, a lot of care into. But these things, they are more widespread than I would like. And I think we've had our fill. And, I try and live by this too. Like I said, there's a reason I've largely walked away from Star Wars, because I don't want to sit down and be disappointed every time I watch a thing. So I've had to do this as well with some things. I'm currently debating whether or not I am going to watch the 5th season of Stranger Things. While there were some parts of the 4th season that were really good, it looks like they're carrying over a lot of the stuff that I hated. I don't want to watch something that I hate for a full season. It's a question of whether I'm going to give it the chance to try and win me over. I don't know. I might. But if it doesn't, pull my interest quick, if I find myself rolling my eyes through 2 episodes in a row right at the start, I might walk away immediately. And that'll suck. This first season of Stranger Things is amazing. Third season's really good. Second season's okay. Fourth season, but I don't need to keep going to that well if it makes me upset. Neither do you. Hatedoms. They're a thing, and they are exhausting. Especially when you accidentally stumble into them, which, as I said, I have done. With Has Been Hotel, I have stumbled ass backwards into Hatedoms on occasion, and it's not fun. It's not fun to realize that there is a group of people dedicated to loathing a thing that you were just talking about because you thought you had something interesting to say about it. But whatever your thoughts are on any of this, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help as well. Don't worry too much about it, though, because what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.
And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Fulla, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Don't worry, the rats are all fine, but my rat wrangler is not here right now, and I thought we could have Archie say hi. Or not.